welcome to the Blood Brothers podcast. We are joined as ever by myself, Sean Coleman, Mr. Rob Parker, and Mr. Chris McDonald.
Hello.
And we are joined in our guest author seat today by Ann Cleeves, none other than Ann Cleeves, author of, I tried to count, at least 36 books.
No, 30, 31 or 32, I think.
I'm pulling the short stories in as well. Hello, Anne.
All right. No, that's cheating.
So, Anne, thank you for joining us. I was just reading about, and Rob was just talking about currently reading The Long Call, which is your North Devon set.
Yes.
Am I right in thinking this introduces a new character for a new series?
It does. It introduces Detective Matthew Venn, who is quite interesting, I think, because he grew up in a very strict evangelical community that I call the Brethren. And so he's coming back to this place after having been cast out by his family and his community because he lost his faith. He was unfellowshipped, but comes back to be a police inspector, back to North Devon, back to where the two rivers meet, the Tor and the Torridge. And he sort of bumps into a crime that in which that community, the Brethren, is involved. So that's how it starts. And he's gay, so that makes it even more difficult for his family to reconcile, really.
And the family are all still there. So
we start off at his father's funeral. So yes, we start off, and he's waiting outside. I'm not sure whether he should go into the funeral. And we don't really know whether he'll be brave enough to go in, but then he gets a call that there's a body on Crow Point, so he has to go and investigate.
It's a fabulous opener. In terms of grabbing you and setting the scene all in one go, but adding those seeds. I was so interested in Matthew's backstory immediately.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'm working on the second one now because the new Vera book comes out in a couple of weeks' time at the beginning of September, and so I'm working on the next in the Matthew Venn series at the minute. So it's nice to know that you've enjoyed meeting him.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, very much so.
And meeting the other team members.
So I've just spent the last 12, 13 weeks living with my father while he's going through some treatment, and one of the things we did most days was watch an episode of Vera.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of them.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just go, we can both do this and we can both love it. Even he's 75, I'm 46, we can just be like, right, Vera. It was lovely. I really love those characters.
Yeah, I think it's been a really great adaptation, partly because Brenda Blethyn, who plays Vera, is such a stunning actor. You have a double Oscar nominee portraying the character that you've created. It's astounding, especially as her way of working is always she says she goes back to the source material, which is the books. So that her Vera is very much my Vera. So I don't care what they do with the rest of it. They can change the murderer, take out plot lines, put in plot lines. But what they do is capture, I think, the tone and voice and almost the moral compass of the book too. There is that celebration of kindness that comes over with Vera, and independence, and that strong, competent woman. And as long as they've got that right, I can be relaxed about everything else.
And did you have a kind of Brenda Blethyn character in mind when you wrote her, or did you not have a visual picture and then went, yes, that's beautiful?
Yeah, I think she wasn't, because Brenda is, even when she's dressing down, she's still fairly pretty to look at. She's not hard on the eye. She's got beautiful skin and she moves well. And my Vera is much bigger and more grotesque in a sense, at least at the beginning, but she's morphed more into the Vera of the TV show now, I think. So it works.
Yeah, my
well.
instinct, the opening books of Vera, she just felt a bit more cumbersome in her space in the world. Sort of awkwardness about which was amazingly endearing. But I do think that Brenda captures that nicely. I think
I think she does, and she captures that. I think what's at the heart of her character is that she would hate to be patronized, so she refuses to patronize other people. And some of her team see that as being heartless and cruel, but really it's just she won't butter them up or tell lies about them or make them feel good about themselves, because she would hate to be treated in that way. And I think that's very much at the heart of what of who she is. Yeah, the new book that's called The Darkest Evening and set in midwinter in rural Northumberland. And we learn a lot more about the character, the childhood and the background of Vera in that one. So I'm hoping that readers will enjoy that.
Sort of sense of somebody who doesn't suffer fools gladly, but dismisses them in the kindest of ways, and it doesn't shut anybody down, but you're no longer needed in this scene. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it.
Yeah.
And were you aware when you created Vera that you were creating a character that would be loved and would endure? Was that something that you considered right from the offset, or was it just something that sort of happened with this character?
No, because the book, The Crow Trap, is the first of the Vera books, and there wasn't going to be a detective in it. I had a very young new editor who thought that traditional crime fiction was over and nobody would ever read it again. So what she wanted was a big standalone psychological novel. So Vera doesn't appear till about a third of the way through the book. And that was just because I was stuck, because I wasn't sure what to do next, really. And so in she came. And that first book sold very, very poorly. It didn't sell very many. But luckily, that young editor went away and married an Australian, and I think moved to Australia. So I was then allowed to bring her back in a series. I was quite fond of her by then.
Police procedural with her. Goodbye.
Yeah, as we talked about before we came on air, I'm recording from the Woolacombe Bay Hotel at the moment, which is very near the setting for The Long Call, and it would be absolutely remiss of me to not say that in other rooms just beyond these walls there, I've got numerous family members who, when I said I was talking to you today, were absolutely thrilled and delighted, because we have.
I will send them my very best wishes.
Oh, I will do, thank you. But we've been
I'd
coming
expect
here.
at any point for them to come conga lining in the background.
I honestly, it could happen any moment. There are no barriers. But because I'm just in the bar area. But this area. I wanted to ask about your history with this area, your affinity to this area. The North Devon landscape for me has always been a source of inspiration and intoxication. I just love it down here. But I'm a Mancunian. Well, I'm not a Mancunian. I'm from Warrington. But my thought process is very northwestern. So yeah, what about yourself and this area?
Well, I moved there when I was 11. As I said, my dad was a village head teacher, and he was appointed head of Umberley, which is a village up the Tor Valley on the way from Barnstaple towards Exeter. And so I spent all my secondary school life there. And I've got a friend staying with me at the moment who I met when I was 11, who still lives in Barnstaple. So go back quite regularly. And it was just the most idyllic time, because I was there late 60s, early 70s. So it was still quite laid back, quite hippie. It was before all those Londoners came with their loud voices to do the surfing and all that stuff. It was beach parties and drinking too much cheap wine and music. Yeah, so it was a great time. I loved it.
That's brilliant. I mean, I can assure you those things still happen.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
It's just now that
I went to yeah, not quite so sunny in Warrington, maybe.
No.
So I went to the same school as Matthew then. It was Barnstaple Grammar in those days, but it's the Park School now, and I have friends who teach there still.
Amazing.
So did you go back down on the pretense of a research trip, but actually just to restomp old grounds?
Well,
or did you do it on memory?
I went down quite regularly to stay with my friend anyway. But the book came about because my husband of more than 40 years died quite suddenly. And I just needed to run away from here because I live up in Northumberland, up in Vera land. And I just needed to run away and went to stay with Sue, to run away really from the memories and from other people's pity, and just was sort of walking. And I knew that I'd finished writing the Shetland book, so I wanted something else to write about. And just wandering around, and that was what, and talking to my friend and thinking about the background of Matthew, because I knew people who'd come from that sort of tradition. And so that's how it started, really. Yeah, just going down. So I was there.
Across all of your series, I think the sense of place is one of the biggest characters for me. That you rarely get a very strong sense of Shetland and Northumberland, and that for people outside of the UK don't necessarily recognise, but recognise in a way that we recognise Scandi dramas for their local setting as well. And for North Devon, my sister lives in Campton, so North Devon for me, I always feel when we travel there is such a unique place in terms of the sort of the bleakness of the moor versus the beauty of the sea, and the sort of characters that have lived and dwelled there in the rocks for so many years. It feels like some people have sort of come out of that land, and then you've got all the strange and
I think that's absolutely what it is, that we all grow out of the place that we were born and where the streets that we played in and the community that we grew up in. So place has to be more than a pretty backdrop to the action. It is actually defines the characters and very much informs the plot, because there are some things there are some plots that would work in Shetland but certainly wouldn't work in Northumberland, and the other way around.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, is there somewhere outside of the UK that you would say, right, I'm going to do a Caribbean drama or a Caribbean crime? I'm not saying let's go down the Death in Paradise route, but
no, I think because there isn't anywhere outside the UK that I know well enough to write a novel about. I've certainly written short stories set in Tanzania and in Finland and other places, because I think with a short story, you go somewhere and you have that immediate response that is about what it looks like and the people and that excitement and the smells and that will work fine for a short story, I think.
Yeah, like a snapshot.
That initial impression is really good for a short story, but it doesn't work for a novel. You need to get under the skin of a place much more for a novel.
Yeah.
And I haven't lived anywhere else.
On my on the second novel in my Ripley series, it's set in Anglesey, and a couple of Welsh people have you must have spent a lot of time in Wales, and I think definitely in South Wales, but it's because you can hear the voices so clearly of the people because I've traveled around so much in my life. I've always been a slight foreigner, but in Wales I definitely can hear the voices, and I can always hear them in my head. So I can write those voices, and people feel that you're definitely in Wales now, and you get more than my Yorkshire voices or anything else, which is sort of a parody. But nobody has a half London, half South African, part Welsh, Spanish accent. Nobody has that. So I'm not a character I can write.
Yeah, when I was writing the Shetland books, I would have to go up to Shetland to get that rhythm of the voice in my head.
It's beautiful.
And it's not using dialect really, it's just getting a rhythm of the way people speak.
Yeah, no, for me that's the thing about the Welsh accent, is that it's so sing-song and it's so lyrical, and it sort of moves itself, but there's a pattern to it which suggests familiarity or aggression, and it's very fine, the balance. And when you sort of listen to people I did some tours in Shetland and in the Hebrides and some other things, and you listen to the islanders speak, and there's a difference in the way they speak to foreigners and each other, and there's that.
In Shetland, it's called knapping. If you're speaking slowly for a foreigner, there is a special word for that.
Really?
And it's kind of partly it's a politeness, but it's also it makes clear that you're not quite one of them too.
Can I ask, how do you craft your characters? Because obviously you've had two massive ones that have been brought to life on screen. When you were coming up with Matthew, did you have like a process in place, or did he come to you sort of fully formed?
Kind of fully formed. And again, people have said, why do you make him gay? Did your publisher ask you to do that? That's very, and I was also aware that I didn't want to appropriate somebody else's experience and view of the world. So it was quite tricky, but he's gay because after Tim died, the couple that scooped me up and looked after me and fed me wine and let me weep on their shoulders with our very close friends, a gay couple, Martin and Paul. And so those people were in my head when I was writing. It was just at that time. And so it just that really. And Matthew isn't either of them, but that happy marriage is what I wanted. I've never written a happy marriage before. And this is the first happy marriage that I've written. And so I was very concerned that I got it right. So 3 gay couples have read the book before it went to the publisher.
Yeah. Because I think there's also something incredibly important right now about there just being gay characters as characters in books that are also the detective, not always the victim, also the person, always also love, not.
Right. So I didn't want the fact that he was gay to be a huge deal. So we don't. At first, we don't know that he is, and he's just somebody who's happily married, and that seemed just very important.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it just sort of normalizes everything to an extent that you just go, the character's about a lot more than their sexuality, and with any other character, you wouldn't be discussing in any way a straight character's sexuality. But so let's just try and get role models in for people in places, in jobs that everybody else gets to do. Otherwise, it's always just, the victims, or you fall in love, but they die the week after,
Yeah.
Yeah, please don't tell me if I've got this, if I'm not there yet, because I've still got about half of the book to go. So please don't tell me if I'm wrong. But their relationship, though, is it's like that rarity that you don't often get in crime books. As in, it's a really good one. It's a really it's purely born out of love and nothing else. It's great, and there's a dependability. But you can always also see that Matthew gets an awful lot of strength from this relationship, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. And I think, as I say, none of my other central characters have been in a happy marriage. And so it was a real joy writing this happy marriage where both depend on each other, trust each other absolutely, have moments where they really don't have to struggle to fit in with the other person's lifestyle. Like, Matthew coming home from work and he's really not terribly sociable or social, because he's quite haunted and quite guilt-ridden, quite buttoned up and uptight. And he comes home and Jonathan's got all his mates there and they're all drinking, and he's got to be, and having to sort of learn to deal with that and accept that that's how it's going to have to be at times. That was quite fun to write.
But it's also a fantastic juxtaposition, isn't it, of the horrors that your detective will see during the day and then still trying to balance a normal and happy life. We were talking last week to Cara Hunter about the same thing, is to have a happily married detective and then find you can't roll back on any of the sort of the tried and tested, curmudgeonly tropes, because what they've got to get to is the happiness, not the everything else, and work is throwing the difficult stuff. So I love that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the Brethren, if I could.
Yeah.
And about the research into that evangelical offshoot. At the same time, I found it seemed so oppressive and so controlling, but at the same time, the people who believed, appear so sort of at the same time liberated. It gives them such strength as well. I find that question of faith to the point of reason not being a part of it. Very, very interesting. And I wondered what research, whether this was something that you've always wanted to tackle, Anne, or whether it's just
again,
you had to research
it was coming across somebody who'd grown up with that sort of background and had actually moved away from it, but still managed to keep a very good relationship with their family. So it was more about, I didn't want them to be cruel, too oppressive, you could go really over the top with it. But I just wanted to explain what it must have been like to live with people of such certainty. And I think that there are a lot, and it doesn't have to be religious certainty, really. I think you would find it equally oppressive to live with somebody who had such political certainty, such commitment to one party that they didn't have a broader view of the world. And I think that that's what I wanted to write about. So it wasn't so much, and the brethren, they're called the Barham Brethren. Barham is the Latin name for Barnstable. There isn't a group like that, so it was fictitious. Though of course there are small groups within the West Country, like Plymouth Brethren, I guess, is the most famous one. But so it was just trying to explain something about Matthew, really.
So that question of conviction without compromise, there's no compromise to that kind of conviction.
No.
I love that. And that's sort of a perfect way to explore so many very modern issues that we have about people are so opinion fixed, aren't they, that you can't it's very hard to have a different opinion from someone without it causing huge disagreement. And it's very it seems to be a great vehicle to explore that very, very prescient question.
I hope so. And in the book that I'm writing now, I think there is some thawing of the relationship between Matthew and his mother, partly because his husband is prepared to try to charm her, really. And so I'm hoping that we will see some form of reconciliation and some warmth between them.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be so lovely.
It just opens up such a wonderful theme for establishment and disappointment and confusion and contradiction and everything. There's so much serial element you can gain from that across the series that it's lovely.
That's why writing a series is so good, because you can follow people through. So in the long call, there's a woman with Down syndrome called Lucy Braddock, and she appears too in the second book. So I like the idea of quite a wide cast of returning characters. So it's much more an ensemble piece, I think, than the other books I've written. So we do have Jen and Ross coming back, but also Jonathan and some of the people at the Woodyard, and Lucy and Maurice Braddock as well. So.
Do you have a set number in your head sort of planned out, or do you know how many will be in the series, or are you sort of open?
No, I don't plan anything. I don't plot in advance. A lot of the characters develop as I'm writing. I don't plan very much at all. So like when I started writing The Long Call, we had the body on Crow Point. At that point, I didn't know who he was. I had to write the next chapter to find out. And that's the way it goes until I get to the end.
There you go, Sean, the best do it.
There you go, yeah. We have this debate all the time.
Just because the best do it doesn't mean you are justified in doing it if you don't produce the best book. So I'm just saying. And I was delighted. I was looking at your website earlier, and I was delighted reading your note to your younger self, which is at the bottom of one of your lists. And I've sort of often thought about that. But your opening line there was, well done for getting published, but don't let it go to your head, because it's much easier to get published in 86 than 13.
Yeah,
which is
absolutely true. It's so hard now for young writers, and during lockdown, it's a total nightmare, because in the past, if you were a new writer, you could do the blog tour and you could do the social media thing. Now everybody's doing that, because none of us can tour. We have none of the big festivals. So, you know, you get the real big hitters doing the things that last year would be the domain of new writers. And so even that they're squeezed out. And it just seems so unfair at the minute for people. It's so hard. We're all fighting over that audience. Yeah.
Yeah. And you think, I mean, there are enough readers out there, and they read, you know, voraciously enough that there's enough room for everyone. But it's just about how you get people in front of other people, and you know, those sort of cross recommendations and things that horribly and horrifically rely on algorithms provided by cynical online sales stores.
Yeah,
You know,
partly, but I think there is still a real word of mouth. But again, because libraries have only just reopened, and I'm sure then they're not doing events, they're not hosting their reading groups so much. The same with indie bookshops. So even those physical things that new authors could, you know, they could go to their local library and they could maybe have an audience of 12 people, but those 12 people, if they really loved the book, would go away and talk about it. You would get a real momentum, or you could, they've not got that now. It's just a tough time for people starting out.
No, and then you kind of wonder how many of the indie bookshops and libraries were struggling before lockdown. How many of those can efficiently reopen in the same way and offer those things to small or indie published authors in a way that isn't, you know, everybody needs to make their money back, and you've got a big publisher that's offering, you know, X thousands for a launch day event, and you're okay, well, we'll have to do that.
That's right.
Have you noticed the industry change?
The industry changed. Yeah, well, yes, because I've been knocking around for a long time. So, you know, I was pre-digital marketing, pre-anything really. It was just reviews, newspaper reviews, and they've been cut back dramatically now. Literature reviews in the National, it's really tough to get reviewed. And just going out there and doing library gigs, and I joined up with a group of other people. So we're 20 years old now, Murder Squad. So joined up with other mid-list authors who are, you know, getting reasonable reviews, but just not selling, because you do need a marketing budget really to get very high up the list. And it's so hard. I'm quite diffident. I could never go into a bookshop and say, read me, I'm quite good. You know, it's tough, isn't it? But I could very happily go into a bookshop and say, oh, you must read Kath Staincliffe because she's brilliant, who's one of our Murder Squad colleagues. And so we put together brochures, we did joint gigs together, and so we would pull in each other's fans to read the whole group. And we're still going, and we're still getting a newsletter out, and we're still doing stuff together.
Perfect.
That's amazing. I because Kath, being a sort of a semi-Mancunian writer with being in Warrington, Kath's an icon to me.
Oh, she's brilliant. I think she's such a fabulous author. She's such a good writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's Kath, Margaret Murphy, who set up the whole group, who's still writing and still being published. Martin Edwards, who wrote The Golden Age of Murder, which is a fabulous non-fiction book about the whole genre.
How did you meet each other? How did you become
through
the
the
Murder
Crime
Squad?
Writers Association Northern chapter originally.
Since we're on the Crime Writers Association, I think you're probably the only Diamond Dagger winner we're ever going to have. This is a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes. Yes.
That must have been amazing.
It was, it was lovely, because it is recognition from your peers, because it's the association that vote for you. So that was lovely. It was a lovely evening. Great evening. And because Brenda came along, Brenda Bleffin was there, and Kenny Doughty, who plays Aidan, was there, and Elaine Collins, who first found the books for telly, and her husband is Peter Capaldi, so he was there bringing a bit of glamour to the occasion. So it was terrific. As well as my local librarian, who we'd paid to come down share it with her.
Oh, that's lovely.
Fantastic. I mean, that's one of those things that you just go, I've been having fun. I've been writing these books and I really enjoy it. And I've made all these stories up and I've built these worlds and I've written these characters and people love them. And now you're all going, you get the diamond.
Yeah.
It's just such a lovely thing.
I think I got it for just being hanging on in there for a long time, really.
Which is entirely my plan. It's entirely my plan as well.
What you need.
I was just going to ask, how do you decide which character gets what?
That comes from the place as well, I think. So I always know the place is what I start with. So before I start writing the book, I know it's going to be a North Devon book or a Northumberland book. And really, it just grows from there because there are stories that come out of the place. So Northumberland has this huge palette of different backgrounds, possible settings. You've got the moors and the beaches and the lovely bits, but you've also got very interesting post-industrial landscape. We were hit by the miners' strike, so there are lots of former pit villages which are really quite deprived and depressed now. And we did build ships and we don't anymore. So there's all that kind of history and background to the region too. So it's where I decide I'm going to set the story is where the story grows out of, I think. And that's where the characters come out of too. So that's really how it works. So the book that I'm writing now, the new Matthew Venn, it's set a bit in a kind of artists' commune because that's so North Devon, but you wouldn't be getting an artists' commune in urban Newcastle or they're just very different places.
And will you, is there any kind of pressure from publishers to do another in, say, Shetland series, or is there sort of a time scale?
I mean, when I'm out of contract, we discuss what I want to do next. And I was quite clear that 8 was enough Shetland books. There are 23,000 people living in Shetland. There are only so many of them you can kill off. So I've never felt any under, and I pitched the idea for Matthew Venn at that point because I did have this sort of vague plan about that it would be nice to write about this character, so pitched that. And so so I'm nearly at the end of the contract, but it was a 4-book contract and it was 2 Matthew Venns and 2 Veras, and I'd like to alternate between series because it's I would be very bored, I think, just doing one series because I like getting to an end of a book and thinking, oh, great, I can go home and write about Vera now. Or, oh, that's great, I'm going to, in my head, go back to North Devon and explore what's going on there. So,
like returning to old friends that you haven't seen for 6 months. You go,
yeah, it's exactly like that. Yeah, or a year. I write a book a year. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there seems to be a good solid formula, the book a year thing. We're noticing more successful people are doing a book a year.
I think a book a year is enough. I think you need to have time to get it right. And so, you could probably write a book in 4 months quite happily, but it probably wouldn't be a very good book because you wouldn't have time to then go back and think about it. You have in your head such a clear idea about what's going on that sometimes you forget to tell the reader. So you do need to set it aside for a little while and come back to it fresh. So you can see if you have on the page what you have in your head. And sometimes you don't.
That's such a great piece of advice. Yeah. Such a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
But and that little while is a couple of months, not like 2 days,
No, not a couple of months, but a few weeks certainly. And I also need then it to be read by somebody else because again, you're so close to it at that point. You've been living with it for however long, 6 months or so. You need somebody from outside to look at it, and you need somebody honest but kind to tell you where the gaps are and where the sort of soft and sludgy bits are and where you need to tighten up a bit.
And so do you have trusted readers, beta readers, before it goes to your editor?
Yeah, I have my two agents, my English, my UK agent, Sarah Menguch, reads it, but she has a co-agent in the States called Moses Cardona, because the books sell quite well now in the US. So it makes sense for them to feed back notes together, so that what works in the UK is also going to work in the US. And if there's anything that's really going to jar with the US audience, it's good to know. You know, I might not change it, but it's still good to know.
Yeah.
And so do they coordinate those two notes before they come back to
they
you?
coordinate, so I only get one set of notes. Yeah, so they coordinate together and share
That's
their
excellent.
ideas about the book. So they're thinking and talking about it together to come to some conclusion about what they think's working, what isn't. And then I'm so lucky because I'm published by Pan Macmillan in the UK and Minotaur St Martin's Press in the US, and they're all part of the Macmillan Group. So then my two editors come together, discuss the book, and give joint feedback.
Oh, that's excellent.
So again, they've discussed it in detail together, and so I get really brilliant feedback. And I don't get just one person's feedback. I get this sort of this dual vision of the book from all sorts of different sides. Yeah,
so
very
you
much
basically end up having two very highbrow book clubs before read.
Exactly that. And I'm so lucky because it's a good editor can make a book. You really do need it.
Yeah.
So even if you're an indie writer, you need somebody who you can trust to be honest to read the book before it goes to press, I think.
I think the words you use there, you know, sort of no story, but is kind and honest, I think makes the best editors.
That's right.
Sort of gently suggest
they
that
need
this
to be
is
tactful.
Peaky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tactful but ruthless, I would say, how they should.
Poor Chris gets editorial notes from me that go, "Oh God, fuck off! I'm crying."
Which is my aim always.
But it's and I think, you know, when I first, because I'd come out of a film and TV background, so I was used to a collaborative process in the final product. When I first wrote my first novel, I sort of felt like I was completely on my own, and it was only when I started getting notes back from the publisher and from the editor that you're like, "Oh, it's okay. There's other sensible people involved here. It's not all just." It just felt so isolated. You know, by the time you go, right, that's it, ready to hit the publisher, you feel like you're handing in something that's a lot more refined than you would be in a first draft feature.
I'm very, very pleased to have my agents have a look at it, because they have to sell it on to the publisher, but also to overseas publishers too. And so if they don't have a real understanding about what the book's about and what you're trying to do, and then I think they would find it tricky to sell on to Scandinavia or Germany or wherever else to go. So I think they need to have that investment.
And a good agent that really understands story and is passionate about it. It just
I think most agents have worked as editors at some point in their background too. So
No, it's fantastic. And have you been with the same ones for a long time now, or have you?
Both my agent and my publisher I've been with for a very long time. Yeah. I don't.
It's lovely.
I mean, I'm sure if I wanted to change publisher, there might be takers out there, but I've never looked for a new one. I'm very happy with. Pan Mac is a lovely publisher. I love the team. They're small enough that when I go into the office, I know lots of people, but big enough that they've got good distribution, and they have a great team of reps. And that's something that not every publishing house has, that these reps who know the sellers in their patch and who have built relationship up with booksellers and librarians over the years, and they're just phenomenal to work with.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that you can't replicate. You can't fashion it out of thin air. It's that real world industry experience and contacts made. And, you know, we can all, you know, write a decent tweet once in a while, but that doesn't correspond to, you know, really connecting with an audience and a market in the marketplace, quite like these magnificent people.
Which is why I'd always make anybody saying you're an overnight success. You're like, well, you're not. You're the product of everybody else's hard work to get all of these contacts and get all of these things, and you're in exactly the right position at the right time to hit a zeitgeist that your book flies. And it's undermining the entire.
I was 20
process.
years without any commercial success, so it did take I wasn't anywhere near an overnight success. 20 years of being published, a year.
And so that was what I was going to ask, was what was that? You said your first Vera didn't sell incredibly well, with sort of the very mediocre. What was that process? When was the moment when you're like, I think I'm in for the lifetime achievement here?
The first book that made me think that things were changing was Raven Black, the first of the Shetland books. And that again was luck, really, that I had this idea. I'd been in Shetland, although I started off, I went there first more than 40 years ago. I worked in Fair Isle, one of the more remote of the inhabited islands, and I'd been going back as a visitor for lots of years, but had this idea for a novel set there because I went back at midwinter and I'd never been there in midwinter before, and so wrote this book. And I think because, and it wasn't planned and it wasn't deliberate, but because Scandi Noir was quite a big thing at that point, and Shetland is as near to Scandi as you can get in the UK, really, because it's on the same line of latitude as Bergen and bits of Greenland and bits of Alaska. But I think the background, again, the place, the setting, caught reviewers' imaginations, and it went on to win the Gold Dagger, which was huge for me. And that was the first book that actually sold and made me some money, because it sold in Germany and Scandinavia as well.
Yeah, and then did you see an uptick in other sales and everybody saying, oh, that author, or did that still bubble slowly?
I remember going to the London Book Fair and people saying, well, to my agent, well, why haven't we heard about this author before? And her saying, well, you have. I've been pitching her books for the last 10 or 15 years. You've had the proofs to read, you just haven't picked them up.
Anne, could I ask you whether advice? What advice would you give to an author just starting out now, or who's trying to connect in the crime world? What would you say to them?
Write the sort of book that you would enjoy reading. Don't write for the market. Don't look at what's selling well now and think that if you write that sort of book, you're going to become a bestseller, because the market will have moved on by the time you finish the book anyway. And if you're not passionate about it and it's not your voice, then it's not going to work. And then get to the end of the book, because quite often when you start, there's this great temptation to rewrite the first chapter or to tweak the beginning. But you just plow on and do quite as speedily as you can, not worrying about it being perfect until you get to the end, until you have that framework of the story down. And then you can go back and do the editing and the tweaking but the scary bit is getting to the end, and you need to do that quite quickly.
I think that's so nice, because I think the first two I wrote, I recognized that I had real completion anxiety. There was this sort of you flying along and everything's, and you know exactly how you want it to end, but actually putting that ending in and going, right, that's done, let's go back to the beginning and rework. I barricaded more in those final accelerating chapters than in any of the chapters preceding them. It's ridiculous.
I think people think that agents and editors are going to look at the first bit, so that needs to be perfect, but there is a real danger of overwriting that. So just get to the end first, and then you can go back and see how it looks after.
There's so many novels and so many TV series as well that you see that the opening is exceptional, and it just sort of tails off and gets a bit scrappy and sloppy and everything else towards the end, because again, it doesn't have as many revisions and it doesn't have as many redrafts, and you haven't sort of honed and perfected every single word, because by that point you're hitting deadline or doing whatever. But it's you're right. You've got to rough it all out and not look back, and then come back and start again.
I think so.
I at this stage of my career, Anne, I think I'm still at the point where I love the 6-7 books in now. So I still really get a kick out of seeing the art for the books that come out, and when you first get to see that cover for your book for the first time, I find the books certainly, well, for all 3 of those major properties that you have, so striking. And do you still get that? I mean, you were saying 31, 32 books down the line. Do you have any input in that? Do you still get that same sort of level of excitement about seeing what your book will look like? Or is it not a thing?
Yeah,
it is what it is.
I am interested, obviously, in seeing that, but really, it's not my book once I see the page proofs. At that point, it belongs to the reader. It doesn't belong to me. So,
that's lovely.
I feel that it's going to go out there, and because I think reading is just as creative as writing, really. We give the reader the framework, but they bring their own pictures and their own imagination and their own creativity to the story. And part of what we do, I think, part of the skill of what we do is to leave enough space within our storytelling that they can do that. We don't describe everything in minute detail. One small detail is enough. And then they fill in the gaps with their imagination.
Oh, that's so great.
And if you overtell it,
I keep thinking,
if you overtell it, then that's not going to work. So you have to be quite spare, I think.
Yes, I think I love that idea that in everyone's heads, if you could see what everyone was thinking about your books and the way it's told, and think about all the different adaptations there are in other people's heads of your work. I'd love to, just out of interest, I'd love to look at all the different adaptations people have put together in their heads of our books. That would be amazing. It would take forever, but well, it might take a weekend for me. It might take you a bit longer. You'll read it a bit longer. But
even just the rogues gallery of all the imaginings people had for you. Whenever we do one of those, like, who do you see playing my lead?
Oh yes,
the range is vast. Really?
Could you settle a family debate then for me, Anne, perhaps? Because we're all talking about which beach this is on the front cover of The Long Call.
That's not anywhere in North Devon. It's fiction. It's a designer's idea of a beach.
No.
Look at that disappointment.
Rob, just go back and tell your family that you were right.
Yeah.
Yes, I might have to, because we've all got a little wager on it, you see. So, I mean, what I can tell you is we're all wrong.
But they don't need to know that. Take their money.
Yeah, take their money.
Yeah, I'll take it.
They don't listen to the podcast, so.
Ooh, I don't know. I think a few might with this week's guest.
Okay, but then that's good, because then they'll only know that you've robbed them on Thursday.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. Just edit this bit out, Sean. That's what I'm trying to say.
Shall we play the 1-star game?
Yes. We were talking about, Anne was talking rather lovingly about readers. We have a regular feature on this podcast, Anne, which is to Chris trawls the internet to find a 1-star review of a book that we all know and love, or should know and love. And then he reads us the review, and we try and guess what book it is based on the crazy review. It's not one of yours.
Okay.
Never do that. Now I've been successful the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to try not to blurt out, because I
think there's a good clue in this one that that helps without giving it too much away. Okay. So Mel gave this book a 1-star, a very disappointing read. Quite frankly, it was just rather dull and nonsensical. I usually read books within 2 days. I've been stuck trying to make my way through this rather boring book for over a week now. How could a woman with amnesia successfully keep a diary and secret mobile phone from her husband. Furthermore, for such a length of time without being caught or arousing suspicion. I could have forgiven a few inconsistencies, but this is entirely unrealistic and therefore feels like a waste of my precious reading time. I just want to finish it in order to start another book, which I hope will be significantly better than this tripe.
I know which it is, and I
stop.
can't remember the name. Is it Before I Sleep? Is that the name of the title of the book?
Before I go to sleep. Yeah, well done.
No way. Well done.
Well done. He's on the show next week as well, so hopefully he doesn't listen to this week's one.
Maybe we'll steer him to one of the early ones.
Yeah.
I think we all have those 1-star reviews that you just say, you just don't get this. This was not meant for you in that case.
But
They're fine.
But that's fine, isn't it? Because reading's so subjective that there are. If you sit in a reading group, everybody's got different ideas about what's a good book and what isn't, and there's no right answer.
Yeah.
We read the sort of books that we want to read. We write the sort of books we want to write.
Yeah. Do you check your reviews?
No.
It's probably for the best, isn't it?
I like that. Very simple.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask whether you had a favourite 1-star review of your own.
No, I don't read them.
Of your own work. Because you just don't read them at all. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Life's
That's
too
brilliant.
short, isn't it?
It is.
I realised that every negative review needed about 15 positive ones to get me almost back to a point where I believed it was worth me having written the book. So I just was like,
just don't read them.
Yeah.
Don't read them. I think if it was a review from a reviewer that I trusted and valued, so maybe not an unknown reader, but someone like Jake Kerridge, or if it was somebody that I knew really understood the genre and really I rated, then obviously you would take notice because you might learn a lot from that. But readers' reviews are just very unpredictable, and it depends, whether they're having a bad day or you just don't write the sort of books that they enjoy reading. And it's not really about the quality of the writing, it's just they're not in the mood for that sort of book that day.
And it's at this stage that we like to ask, what are you reading at the minute? Are you reading anything good?
I've just finished a brilliant book, and it's called Summer Water, and it's by Sarah Moss, and I think it's out next week. It is the best book I've read for ages and ages. And
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's not really crime, though there is a crime, or there is an incident, but it's about the people who are staying in this kind of holiday place, and it's all these wooden chalets that have been there for quite a long time, and some of the people who have them have bought them, and they're long term, and they use them every summer, and so they feel very protective of them. And it's raining, and it's by a Scottish loch. And she gets inside the head of all these people who are in this holiday complex in the rain. And there's the woman who runs, because that's her way of getting rid of the frustration. And they're the family with the small kids. And everybody knows they should be enjoying themselves because it's a holiday. But it's really good for lockdown because it has that claustrophobic, I'm stuck here with these bloody kids, or I'm stuck here with this husband that I thought I cared for and I don't, or I'm here, this very sweet young couple, and he really thinks that the key to happiness is to have a simultaneous orgasm, and he's just, all they do is spend all their time in this chalet trying to make this happen, and it can't quite achieve it. So
that sounds great.
But she just gets in the head of all these people, and then you find out how they link, and it's the rain and the claustrophobia, and then you see that, and there is some contact between these different people, but you understand immediately those characters that she's writing about. And it's not flashy, it's not pretentious, it's just bloody good writing, and you just wish that you could have done it. So great. Summer Water by Sarah Moss.
Yeah, right, that's a brilliant recommendation.
That's on the list.
Yeah, I've just looked it up. Hilary Mantel likes it as well, so she's got good rave
Oh,
reviews
you
there
looked it
from Ann
up,
Cleeves
yeah.
and Hilary Mantel.
She's just such a good writer.
I've just pre-ordered it actually.
Oh, good.
Did you?
It sounds
I thought
great.
you were just texting your mum, but you were actually.
No, I was like, well, if it's recommended, yeah, I'm up for that. What about you two?
Well, I'm halfway through the Long Call by the rather brilliant Ann Cleeves, and I'm also reading A Bowl of Cherries, which is the short story collection by F.E. Birch. And I was lucky enough to be asked to give a quote for this one. So I've gone with, it's a patchwork quilt of daring fever dreams stitched together with effortless, bewitching prose. And I'll say as a collection, it's really highly recommended. So yeah, go out and buy it, listeners, please.
Lovely words. Her lunch was very good last night. I watched it. It was
Yeah.
very funny.
Was it good?
She spelled cherries all over her dress or a drink or something.
Oh no!
But yeah, it was really good. And the story, she read a few of her stories out, and it sounds really good.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic! No, it is really, really good, and a really good. You know, what I like about a collection is variety, and there is a lot of variety. You know, and they're like, you know, sometimes you get an insight, don't you, into, well, you always get an insight into writers when you read their work, and whether the writer wants that to happen or not, you always get that. But it's great to see a variety of different little insights that are apparent in this collection. So yeah, it's really cool. Really cool. I really.
What are you reading, Chris?
Awesome. I started Final Cut by S.J. Watson a few days ago. Really good. Yeah, cracking on with that.
I wouldn't have necessarily known about it so much unless, for some reason, Red Dog Press got tagged in the launch of it. It was like, this is out by, and with us on the tweet. So everybody who said how much they love it, I've read.
It is really good. Yeah, it's set up in like North, like Blackwater Bay, which is fictional, but I think based on Robin Hood Bay. Could be wrong, but yeah, it's a sort of, it's in this little community where everyone knows everyone and there's secrets, and it's very good.
That sounds very cool. Yeah. Very cool.
Well, very good.
Lovely.
Anne, could I ask, of the, I feel like there's not enough hours in the day to read all the great crime books that I'd like to. As you look out across the crime domain, who do you look at and you think, wow, these people are doing great things? Is there anyone that springs to the top of your mind?
Well, I love Cass Staincliffe, because every book is different, and I loved the last one. Not sure if it's just out or just about to be out, because I think she's Quiet Acts of Violence, is it? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's stunning. Just one of my favorite of hers. It features the two detectives who are in The Girl with the Green Dress. So you don't have to read them as a series, but it's great to see them back because they're just very believable.
Yes, it is out now as well. It just came out in July. I'd add as well that the book that she wrote before The Girl in the Green Dress, The Silence Between Breaths, the train book, I just thought that was astonishing. Just an astonishing, brave. There's not many authors on the planet who could tackle that subject matter and give it that kind of service.
No, she's
it was amazing.
Really good. Yeah. So I think she's one of the underrated writers of her generation, underrated crime writers of her generation.
Totally agree. Can we get her on, guys? Do you think?
Oh,
I think we might have to have a word with her.
Yeah, she's just very funny and very witty and a great speaker too. So do get her back.
Yes, yeah. She was very kind. In I did a reading event in Manchester back in 2018, and she very kindly came and read, and it was just brilliant. I had one of those, I was shaking around her kind of moments.
Yeah, so she's so good.
It was great.
Yeah, great writer.
And one of your Murder Squad.
Yeah.
And the Murder Squad. I think that's I keep seeing I've obviously you're aware of so much, aren't you, as a writer in this corner of publishing world, and the Murder Squad is a name that I've kept seeing right the way through starting, back in 2012, 2013. So yeah, it's great.
Well, I mean, you guys obviously get on very well, but it's quite a lonely business, and it's so nice to have people in your corner who are there supporting you and providing contacts and opportunities that might not work for you but might work for somebody else. So
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's interesting because it's only because of lockdown that this podcast exists. But Chris, Rob, and I have met once in the flesh at Chris's book launch. And everything else has happened digitally, and we are very good friends. We talk to each other. We have a WhatsApp group. We support each other's writing and support works, and you suggest ideas. And I've got this blurb. What do you think, guys? Or I need a tagline for this guy. And I've always worked in this way, and I think you do. You definitely need peers that you trust, that you can lean on for support, because otherwise it is a very isolated experience, and you run the risk of heading up your own arse.
Yeah.
Quite rapidly.
Listen, I'm going to have to go quite soon because I've got to take my friend to the airport to get back down to Bristol. So.
God, let's not delay flights. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honour.
Lovely, thanks. It was great to chat to you.
And to you, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye, everyone.